Welcome back to Jobsessed, the podcast that's all about looking for, landing, and loving your next job. On today's episode, we'll be talking with a mind coach who's literally written the book on luck, and he's going to share the 7 secrets of lucky people and how you can learn them. Then we'll hear from a man who spent 25 years in an industry that's all about luck. As a Las Vegas casino dealer, we'll learn what it's like working at one of the most exclusive casinos in Vegas with some of the highest rollers on the planet. For our first segment, we want to explore the role that luck plays in your career and job search. Sometimes people will say, oh, I lucked into the perfect job. Or if you've been looking for a job for a while but nothing's come up, you might say, I'm just not having any luck with my job search. But how much importance does luck really play? And can you find a way to create better luck, to stack the deck, so to speak? Dr. Simpson is a medical doctor who now works as a mind coach and is also the best-selling author of the book Get Lucky Now, which is available on Amazon. And he is something of a luck expert. So we wanted to ask him if you can actually increase your odds of success, and if so, how to do it. So welcome, Dr. Simpson.
Hi, thanks for having me on the show, Julia.
So I feel very lucky to have you here today. And, so I guess the first question is, can you increase your own luck?
Well, the answer to that is simple. You definitely can. And there's some very logical reasons about how you can attract more luck into your life. And then if you're prepared to go into the esoteric areas, there's some things that are completely illogical, but somehow seem to work for people.
Oh, I think we'd like to hear about all of those. I think one thing that I did want to ask you too is, especially when people think about achieving goals and success, there's that old mantra, that old adage, which is, well, the harder I worked, the luckier I became. So there's this idea that there's a work ethic involved and that there isn't, any kind of magical quote unquote luck. What would you say to that?
It's a very ambiguous statement. Some people say it in a very cynical way, and others say in a way, well, wow, this is cool. I can make my own luck. And that's the way I prefer to say it. Now, the cynics, they believe that the harder you work, literally, the more lucky you're going to get. And there's going to be a massive amount of effort. There's going to be a lot of stress, a lot of furrowed brows, and a huge amount of willpower. Now, there's no doubt that people with those qualities, they can make their luck, but what a high price they pay for it in terms of their health and their stress and relationships and everything else. Because there are easier ways to be lucky, and you don't have to work as many hours. You maybe just have to work a little smarter. And a revolutionary thought here, you just have to use your head and your brain in a slightly different way. And that's really the secrets that I share with people. And I better say straight away, these are not really my secrets. Some of them have been around for thousands of years. I've just kind of packaged them in a way that I can understand, and that hopefully others can understand and use as well.
So when you say work smarter, what are some kind of examples of that, or what do you mean by that?
All of us understand that our mind is split into the conscious mind and the unconscious mind, or subconscious, as some people call it. That theory's been around for a very long time now. And we spend all of our life, by definition, in our conscious mind, forgetting about the unconscious that is taking care of all of these complex things going on in our bodies and our brain, without any input, without any conscious input from us at all. And the unconscious mind is way more powerful. So if we can make a shift, even a small shift in our thinking from the conscious to the unconscious, then that's when things start to get easy. And everybody can do this because everybody has already done it. All of us can think of a time when we were doing something and we lost all sense of time, and we just had this inner satisfaction with what we were doing, and we liked it. We liked it a lot. Now, that's what athletes call being in the zone. That's what musicians call being in the groove. And speakers might say, I'm in a flow state. And Julie, I'm sure you're familiar with that, aren't you? And so, and as I'm sure everybody else is, the problem is that we find it hard to get into that state, and when we get there, we find it hard to stay there because there'll be something that will drag us back into our conscious mind. So these are the kind of techniques and tips that I try and share with people.
I think especially for our audience, which is a lot of, a lot of people who are actively looking for a job, or if not actively looking, they're really thinking about changing careers or trying to get a new job. I think that it's when you're currently either unhappy or unfulfilled, it's hard to get into that space that you describe. So I wonder what a person could do in order to reposition themselves, even just emotionally, to be more open for some better luck to come into their life, or however you might describe that.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people are in this situation, and I've been there before, and it's not a great place to be, and it's hard to get out of your conscious mind when you're thinking about how am I going to pay the mortgage, how am I going to put food on the table, and all the rest of it. But what I would say to people is first of all, do you really know what kind of job you want? Do you know what you're going for? Because some people have been pushed into career options by teachers, well-meaning teachers or well-meaning parents, and it's not what they actually want to do. So the first thing I would say is, now look, when you're not actually at work, how do you spend your time? Look at your bank account. Where's your money going? Your credit card statements, and that will often give a lot of clues. And just a realization that you're actually applying for the wrong jobs or for a career that doesn't suit you can take a lot of the pressure off. And another thing that can take the pressure off, and funnily enough, I work with elite performers, I work with sports people, I work with poker players, I work with business people, actors, and all that kind of stuff. I haven't got a lot of experience of working with people who are looking for a job, but I did have a young man come to me last year. He was a teacher. He'd just got his teaching qualifications, and had with good qualifications as well. And he could get part-time work, he could get contract work, but he wanted to be at a particular school and see it, as a medium and long-term commitment. And he was going interview after interview after interview, and he would get shortlisted almost all the time. And every time he would get that dreaded rejection letter. And his parents talked him into coming to see me. I'm not sure that he particularly wanted to. But the first thing I said to him, after talking for him a little while, I said, look, you're trying too hard. He said, well, of course I am. It's like the harder I work, the luckier I get. And I said, now, look, I've just been talking to you for a few minutes. And when I ask you the kind of questions that an interviewer is going to ask you, I'm talking to a different person than I was a minute ago when I said, he was telling me about the summer camp he'd been on and how much fun he had organizing the games for the kids. And his body language was completely different. In the first scenario, he was sitting stiff and his face was wooden and his words were wooden. And in the second instance, when he was excited, he was waving his arms around and his voice, I was getting enthusiastic. And I thought, gosh, I wonder if I'm too old to apply to go on this summer camp. And so I said, now, look, when you're in an interview, I want you to remember about the summer camp. And I use a few psychological techniques. We call that anchoring, anchoring that good feeling. And I said, when you're waiting outside the interview room, I want you to remember the summer camp. I remember the friends you were with and all the sounds of nature and all that kind of good stuff. And when you go in there, I want you to let your hands do the talking. And he did that, and we practiced that a little bit. I mean, we talked about a lot of stuff. So I think that's pretty logical. And relatively easy to do. Oh, and the other thing I said, by the way, I said don't go looking for a job. Don't go to an interview to get a job. Now, I wouldn't last long in your industry, would I, if I said that to people?
No.
No. But the point I was making, the more you want something, the more elusive it's going to become because you're going to try too hard. it's just like an actor. If you go to an audition wanting the part, you're not going to get it. If you go there thinking, I'm going to use this as a bit of practice for camera, you might just end up with a bit of luck. Like I have today, by the way. I'm filming tomorrow in a job I never thought I'd get. But anyway, that's another subject. So I told him to go there and I said, look, just go and enjoy the interviews, enjoy the practice, and sooner or later you're going to get the job. Well, what I didn't expect was within the next week, he had 3 job offers. One of them he hadn't even applied for. He'd gone at the weekend to play a game of cricket. You don't play cricket in the States yet. One day, maybe you will, but it's a bit like baseball. And the headmaster of another school was there, and he just liked this guy's attitude. And he said, are you a sports teacher? And he said, well, yeah, I am. He said, well, are you working at the moment? He said, well, no, I'm not. He said, I've got a temporary job starting next week, but I'm actually looking for something. And the headmaster said, don't accept anything. He said, phone me and come to my office tomorrow. And he did, and he got the job. Now, how about that? Now, if that's not luck, then I'm a banana.
Well, and that is a very great way of looking at it. And I think a lot of, conventional wisdom is to try and relax. Like you said, these are very practical tips, try not to reek of desperation, and do what you love, and it's while you're doing what you love that hopefully you'll exude that, as you talk about that energy and enthusiasm and passion that people will pick up on. And so I think that, like you said, this is a great tip, and it's a very kind of practical thing. And I think, like you said, for people who are, depends where you are in your job search or in your life, and if you're down to some kind of difficult financial times, it's not as easy sometimes to manufacture those feelings even. But I think it's a great suggestion. So what else? Now, not everybody, a lot of people might be currently happy in their job, or they just may want to kind of do better at work, or, be a star in their whatever field that they're in. And it sounds like you work with, like you said, you work with professional athletes and poker players. And what are some of the things that you help them with?
In a nutshell, I help them to stay in the moment, and that's a fashionable term. And people talk about, living in the now, and people talk about mindfulness. To me, they're very much the same thing. And unfortunately, we're the generation that has the most barriers to living in the moment, because there's always something distracting us, pulling us into the past or pushing us into the future, or intruding into our thoughts. I mean, by that, I mean, the emails that never stop, even when we're not at work, they keep pinging in, making us feel bad about the next day. The text messages, we've got breaking news all over the world, and sadly, most of it doesn't seem to be very good. So we've got all, iPhones and all these other things are absolutely wonderful, and they're designed to make our lives more fun and easier, and they do. But there's also a downside to that as well. So my advice to somebody who is really trying to do a nice piece of work or on a project is, look, allocate some time for that, whether it's an hour or two. And for that time, switch off all your things that go ping on your computer or your phone. And close the door, and then start by getting your head in a good place. So now here's another practical tip. It's real simple, but it can really work. So you've got the door closed if you have an office with a door. If not, go somewhere where it's quiet. You close your eyes, and you just tune in and listen to. Try and count as many noises as you can. And it's only when you do that. It's like if you're a recording engineer, it's only when you're trying to record something you realize how much extraneous noise there is. But if you kind of focus on that and say, yeah, I can hear the air conditioner, I can hear a car going by, I can hear somebody talking. Once you get up to about 7 things, your mind will be tuned in, and you won't be thinking of the film you're going to watch when you go home. You're not going to be thinking about the nasty letter from the bank you had to open this morning. You will be in a state of mind. And by the way, you can do this exercise. Then you can start constructing movies in your mind of stuff. Anyway, but that's as simple as it need be. And then when you start your project, you will have quietened your mind enough to be able to get into the unconscious mind, because the unconscious mind is always there. It's the conscious mind that kind of blocks things up and blocks those filters so that the good thoughts, can't surface. And a reassuring thought to those of you, you there who, are desperate for that job and all the rest of it. Let me tell you something. Other people will have told you the reason you're not getting a job is you're not good enough, or you're not working hard enough, and all this kind of nonsense. The good news for all of us is that inside our brain, if we can start to use it, we have more than enough that we'll need to get just about any job. Now, if you want to be an atomic scientist, it's helpful to know a little bit about physics. So obviously you have to have the experience and the background. But, that's not the reason why people don't get jobs. It's because of other reasons. So assuming you've got the qualifications, then you can make the most of any job that you're working on and move yourself to at least a higher level. And I hope you do. And I hope your bosses realize that and give you a really nice, pay award this year.
Well, that's good. That's good news, and it's reassuring to hear. And I think you're right. There's a lot of noise and clutter that distracts us, and sometimes I think we think we're multitasking, but we're really just dealing with a lot of distractions. So that's a great suggestion. So, and thank you for that. So I know we only have you for another few minutes, and I think that really, your book has the 7 secrets of becoming more lucky. Is there anything else that you think that would be helpful to our listeners? Another tip that you might, or just kind of piece of information, or that you would want to share with us?
Well,
yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'll very quickly just go through what the 7 secrets are. Obviously, I can only touch upon what they are. The first one I've already mentioned, it's goals. Make sure your goals are in the right place, because if your goals are in the wrong place, nothing's going to work out for you. The first time I worked with a poker player, his goal was to win a live tournament. I mean, he's one of the top players in the world, but he never won one of these live events. And so the first thing I said is, I never want to hear about this again. I never want to hear about you winning your first live event. I want to hear more important stuff like how you're going to keep your focus going for 12 hours a day during a 7-day tournament. And it was way more complicated than that. But something happened, because 3 weeks later, he did win a huge tournament. So and people can say, well, that's variance, it's just luck, or random luck. Well, it's just an example of what I think about goals. Second one is hugely important. It's confidence. So many people, maybe all of us, we want to have a bit more confidence. And in a nutshell, fake it till you make it, as the models say. If you put yourself into a confident posture, your brain will follow. It has to. It's called physiology. So I just tell people how to adopt a confident posture, and the way they walk into a room, the way they sit down, the way they stand.
Bring the body and the mind will follow, maybe.
That's a good way to put it. I'm going to remember that for my next book. Third secret is visualization. If you don't have a picture in your head, you ain't going to get there. There's lots of articles and stuff on visualization, but it's incredibly important. You should not just have a picture in your head. You should have a movie of how you see yourself, doing this job. Once the interview board, stood up and shaking your hands and said, you've got it. You should have that picture before you even go into the interview room. Secret number 4 I'd call that mindfulness, but it's like living in the moment I've just discussed. There are 5 things. People have to Google these, but they're the 3 H's that are big tools that I use. Hypnosis is one, and heart math is a breathing technique, etc., which is another one. Another one is called havening. I don't have to, they're all interesting. They're all incredibly powerful. The 6th one is adversity. Now, this will resonate with your listeners, because not having a job is adversity. And I've been in that position twice, and I know what it feels like. And people will not, at the time, they won't like statements like this, because they'll be hearing it all the time and making them sick. But people say, don't worry, when you look back on this, you'll see it all happen for the best. Well, I got some news. Grandmother was right because very often, and I get this with the elite performers I work with, they often say, "This was terrible when I went through this period of bad form, but that's when I learned. That's when I, was able to make a few changes and turn it to my advantage." So I know it's easy for me to say this, but just hang on to that belief that, there is light at the end of that tunnel. And just possibly you may be able to look back and say, yeah, that worked out for the best. And the final one is the interesting one. And that's what I call magic. It's all the stuff that's going on in this world that I don't understand, the scientists don't understand, but I just instinctively believe that there are things that we can do that attract luck. It's just putting ourselves out there. Putting ourselves out there in any way we can think of, doing blogs, going to meetings, talking to people, making videos. I met a lady who read my book and she'd won a lot of competition prizes. So I said, "Oh, that was luck." And she said, "Yeah." And I said, "How many entries? How many times do you enter a competition?" She said, "Oh, about 200 times a week." Well, then maybe that's not magic. I mean, maybe she is, working luckier, the harder she works, the luckier she gets. But to her, it's not work. She loves entering competitions and she's winning big prizes, probably more than some people earn.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Simpson. You have been just, a dream to talk with, and I know, like I said, we didn't have a ton of time. I could talk with you for even longer, but in the short time that we had, you've really been so helpful.
It's been totally my pleasure. I love talking about this stuff. And if there's one person out there who feels better about getting a job and gets that job, well worth it for me.